Hi there, welcome to Floating in Dreams, welcome to Eyeshadow Palette Month. These are some eyeshadow palettes that I didn't buy. Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. This video is going to be all about eyeshadow palettes that were very popular at some point in time, but that I decided to not buy. Some of these were limited edition, some of these are some newer releases, some of these things were released a little longer ago, but these are all things that I heard so many people raving about and that I just felt like, you know what? I'm gonna pass up on these because, you know, as much as we all see these new makeup releases and it's very much like, gimme, I need it now, you definitely don't have to. So that's sort of where I'm coming from with this video, and I hope you really enjoy it. If you've never been here before, hi, my name is Maaike. I live in the Netherlands. I have fair skin with a cool to neutral undertone. I love chatting about eyeshadow palettes. I love my Essence and Catrice stuff and getting these out of my makeup, and I've been reviewing makeup for more than a decade. So I hope you're here for that and that you would like to consider subscribing. Yes, as I was already mentioning in the intro, I definitely don't buy all of the popular releases. This channel is not about we need to get it now, we need to get it ASAP. I try to have more of an organic approach. I get some PR for sure, but not a whole lot. I buy most of it with my own money. And that means that I'm not always ready to make that kind of purchase or to, you know, put my budget towards it. And there may just be other things. I've already mentioned in the intro that because of the way my skin works, I definitely like a lot of things in a slightly different way because things just work on me in a different way than most creators. So even though, you know, if there are certain things like take the latte trend that's going on at the minute, probably by the time you're seeing this video, we already have another trend going on. I've seen a lot of fair-skinned creators on TikTok do like latte makeup for fair skin. So you definitely see it being adapted, but it's probably something that works best for people with medium skin tones who have much darker hair. I'm lucky that I've got dark eyes and darker brows, so that kind of makes a lot of things a lot more wearable for me. But because of it, I have just taught myself to not be caught up in the hype with a lot of different things and just try and be a little bit more mindful of what's out there and just think twice and not buy everything like straight away. I always wait a little bit, think about it, budget for things, and then I make my purchase. That's sort of how I go about it. So an eyeshadow palette that I didn't buy, that I think, did this come out last year? I think this was last year's Huda Beauty larger palette. We all know by now Huda Beauty releases a larger eyeshadow palette in the fall season for like the Christmas holiday season. I have a few of those. I really like them. I have the Mercury Retrograde, the Desert Dusk, and I have the Rose Quartz, which of course the Rose Quartz is exactly what I like. And then she came out with the Empowered palette. And as pretty as it looked, and as much as I was like, I like it because it looked grungy and smoky and nicely cool toned, and that it could be like a good juxtaposition with the Rose Quartz. I could definitely see myself using this until I started seeing reviews on it. And people who also owned a couple of the 9 pans that had been released the summer before it, which were the animal line, so the python, the tiger, and the wild jaguar. Wasn't there a 4th one? I think there was a tiger one as well. Did I already mention it? I don't remember. But that wild jaguar palette pretty much was already half the 18 pan palette that the Empowered palette was, and that the 9 pan didn't have the weird cream, like there were a couple of creams that were some of the deeper shades. And I was like, you know what? I have that wild jaguar palette already. I think I don't need this because I definitely wanted a couple of the shades. It had a couple of really stunning, more taupey leaning shimmers in there that were in the half of the palette that the Wild Jaguar didn't dupe. But I was like, I just don't think that this palette is going to offer something that's more unique to my personal makeup collection, because I love my cool tones, so I have a bunch of them. And even though some people want me to be that person to try every single cool tone palette out there, I also thought it was a little bit boring in terms of what a cool tone palette can be. I've mentioned this a lot in my cool tone videos, how I feel so many brands think a cool tone needs to be gray, and a gray or a black, and there's nothing else in the cool tone spectrum, whereas there are a lot of options, and that's just because a lot of brands are blind to doing cool tones, just like they can be very blind to like deeper skin tones or very fair skin tones. It's just almost like it's forgotten, it's an afterthought. And I definitely felt that this was going on with this palette as well. We got some random yellows in there. I wasn't exactly sure what to do with this, and now that I didn't buy this, and I can easily like walk into a store, look at this, and go like, I'm glad I don't own that. So I'm happy I didn't get the Huda Beauty Empowered. A bit of an older palette that I wanted to mention. When I came up with this video idea, it was one of the first things I actually thought of, and it's the Colourpop at Foresight, which was the Raw Beauty Christie collab that they did a couple of years ago, and everybody was raving about how good this palette was, and how it was like a new version of the ABH subculture, and it had such lovely texture. And I remember going like, but it's nothing special if you already have the ABH subculture. Now we all know, maybe you weren't here for it if you don't remember, the ABH subculture release drama. That was a thing. It was one of the first true scandals, I think, in the online beauty community, where people, you know, the ABH Modern Renaissance was this huge hype, huge hit. And then they released a subculture, and a lot of people were saying how it wasn't the same formula, and how it was too powdery and you hit pan within a single use. It was a lot of drama for absolutely nothing. I've had mine for years. I've never hit pan. You shouldn't swirl your brush in, because then you're going to get fallout and it's going to look muddy. It's a pressed pigment eyeshadow palette. All you need to do is dupe, and you've got enough product on your brush to create a full eye look with. So I felt that because people didn't take the time to understand this palette, that it actually got a lot of negative reviews for absolutely no reason. But it did lead to a lot of brands either duping the palettes, or something like the Colourpop at Foresight create versions of it that people then liked better. I've always loved my subculture. I've actually decluttered other palettes that resemble it because I love the subculture. It's still one of the best, more grungy, fall vibes eyeshadow palettes. It pairs beautifully if you use multi-chromes with it, because it's a very matte heavy palette and we don't get a lot of shimmers. So my workaround is take some of those grungy mattes, the mustards and the greens and the wine colors in there, and it goes so well with multi-chrome shifty shades. It's insane. So because I have that ABH palette, I've just never felt the need for me to be buying other renditions of it. And I think that if you were someone who was disappointed with the ABH subculture, then something like At Foresight from Colourpop could have been something there. But then I looked at it again and I was like, it was just so much brighter and not as grungy as the ABH was. And I definitely think that we created this need that didn't need to be there. And that's why I kind of boycotted this purchase. I mean, it was right at the height of the Colourpop hype on YouTube that this was released, so I was definitely buying quite a lot of Colourpop when that palette came out, and this is just one I completely skipped on because I was like, I don't need this. I'm not a huge follower of Raw Beauty Christie. It's someone who I used to watch a lot until I started noticing that she was using something and then never really went back to it. You never saw the same product twice on her channel because she just had so much and it took a lot of time for her to rotate through it. And she's definitely changed a little bit. I sometimes watch some of her videos still, but a lot of the much larger creators that were really popular a couple of years ago, I've definitely fallen out of love with that side of YouTube, so I don't tend to watch them. I mentioned ABH, and there are 2 ABH palettes on my palettes I didn't buy list. So the ABH Rose Metals and the ABH Cosmic palettes that have come out, I think in the past year. I bought the Nouveau palette. When that launched, I was like, yes, give me more. That Wisteria shade, that very soft lilac matte that's in there, which a lot of people didn't like, but I love mine. It's got a couple of beautiful shimmers. And then they come out with palettes where I feel I can only use 1 or 2 shades, and I just, for the price point these go for, I can't really justify it. Maybe if it's like a really good sale, I might. The Cosmic palette seems to have some really beautiful shimmers. That Rose, what's it called? Rose Metals palette has one of the best taupes ever. I swatched it in store. And if they were to sell that as a single, I would snatch it up in a heartbeat. But I'm not going to buy an entire palette for 1 shade. I'm just not. I'm over that. It's not something I'm going to do anymore. There's a much better way for me to spend my money than buying palettes where I'm like, because both of these palettes are just incredibly warm toned. It's like these orangey, rusty shades. It's like they've taken some of the base shades from the Nouveau and they're just creating different renditions of the Nouveau as well. Like, I feel they're very one family almost, which I think that that's sort of the intention of the brand. Like, hey, if you have one of these, they all go together. I think that's sort of what they're going for. But that was not the part of the Nouveau palette that I liked. I liked the sagey greens and the purple and that sort of peacocky shade that was in there. It had a couple of really nice shades in there, but those bronzy browny things were not the things I loved, because I feel I have that in a million other palettes, so I don't need 3 of that with different shimmer combinations. I just don't need it in my life. Then a very recent release is the Natascha Denona Yucca, or however it's pronounced differently in different languages. In Dutch, which is my native language, we pronounce it as Yucca. I've actually got, you can't see them, maybe a little bit. This guy right here, you can see a bit of it in the background. That's my little Yucca. I actually have a couple of these plants here. And this palette looks absolutely stunning. The shimmers, very cool toned, very much right up my street. But all I see people do with this palette are green looks. And you get maybe 2 greens in this eyeshadow palette. Everything else is yellow. And I didn't want to say it when this was just newly released, but I had this inkling that the new Yucca palette is the mid-size, like the medium-sized version of the gold. The gold has now been discontinued. I still have my gold palette. Do I then need something that's gonna do essentially the same thing, but with slightly different undertones? Because I think the gold palette is actually a little bit more neutral, and the greens in the gold palette are more teals. They have a bit more blue running through them. They have these duochrome flippy shades in there, like the chroma shades that are in there. Far different texture than what we get in this this medium-sized palette. And then, to make matters worse, I did a thing this year. I reorganized the 4 medium-sized eyeshadow palettes I have from Natascha Denona. And I've by now tried all of these palettes with their rearranged color stories, and I like them better than when they were still in their original lineups. So do I then need to add a palette that I know is not going to add anything new and exciting to my collection, that I'll probably want to rip apart like once I do the looks with the palette as it is? I'm just going to make it part of the Natascha Denona palette family, and I'm going to be rearranging it, and I'm going to put the green with the greens from the retro glam, and I'm going to take some of the cool tone neutrals and pair it with some of the neutral browns from the glam, and that's what I would do with this. And I don't think that I need to spend, what is it, 69 euros on a palette that I don't even want to keep in its original packaging. I don't think so. So I'm going to be skipping the Natascha Denona Yucca. And then a couple of older releases that just, like, as I was brainstorming ideas, I was like, oh yeah. And most of these are things that other creators, I've heard them raving about it a lot, or they were collabs with creators, because I'm just not a collab person at all, to be quite fair. So the Ace Beauté Paletteopoly, is that what it was? That's, I think, how you had to pronounce it. I think they've already discontinued it, or it's being reformulated and they're coming out with a new version. That's sort of what I heard. But when this launched, so many people loved it. This was in top 10s last year, all across the board. And I was asking myself, why? Why do you love this so much? I really didn't get it. The palette itself looked like a complete mishmash of unrelated shades to me. It came with a game, so I think that if you played the game, then you were to get shades that you could put together, and everybody was saying how it was so innovative that they did this. I'm like, why do we now need a card game to tell us what to do with our makeup? Can we please use our brains? Like, we're only one step away from AI creating our eye looks anyways, so where's the creation in that? Part of the fun of using eyeshadow palettes is trying combinations that maybe you wouldn't try yourself. So just the gaming element to it, I didn't find exciting at all. I just thought it added costs and unnecessary packaging to a product that was a way too big palette that had a lot of superfluous shades, that had a lot of shades that didn't match in its undertones. So I was like, why? Why are we doing this to ourselves? And it was in so many people's like top favorite lists of the year, and I was like, I really don't get it. I really didn't. So this was a very easy pass for me, but it is one that really popped into my brain as like, oh yeah, you definitely wanted to skip that one, because I don't care how much everybody else liked it. I was like, nope, nope. And then I have a couple of collabs palettes left. So I mentioned that I'm just not very inclined buying all of these collabs. I know a lot of people say, oh, that's how you can support the creator. And maybe if I ever got the chance to do a palette, of course I would appreciate it if people bought my palette. But I also feel that these creators creating palettes with brands kind of skews their opinions of certain brands. I'm not gonna lie. I feel this kind of happened with Odin's Eye. Odin's Eye is a brand that collabs with a lot of people. I have their collab with Angelica Nugvist, but they've done a collab with it was like a trio of people. It was Annette's Makeup Corner, Tina from The Fancy Face, and Judy. So they had their palette family, and of course earlier this year we had Lauren May Beauty, Betty Bean from Beauty Bean, and the third person, Makeup Just for Fun, Amanda, had like these like 3 palettes that they then do, and I didn't buy a single one of them. The Wolf palette by Annette's Makeup Corner definitely sort of sucked me in. That's my kind of color story. The more neutrally Flora palette from the trio of palettes we got this year by Amanda definitely sucked me in, because these are color stories that I adore. However, Odin's Eye as a brand, I have just found them a bit inconsistent sometimes. I've purchased everything with my own money. I've never collabed with them. I do have affiliate links in my description box down below for palettes if you do want to make a purchase. So I can make a bit of a commission if there is a loyalty program there and that it's there. I have this website that I can run all the links through, and they kind of do it all for me. But I just don't feel like I need to, like, I get it why they do this, because from a marketing perspective, this is brilliant, because you don't just want to buy the one, you want to buy the set. That's already part of it. And you want to buy from the creator that you're supporting, that you love. And because you love that creator, you also hope that they come out with a color story that not only they represent, but also that you feel very comfortable with, because we very often follow the people that we feel go with our own aesthetics and that we feel we can identify with. So it definitely goes into that whole section there. And I think that Odin's Eye is very clever at playing into it. But as I mentioned, I have 6 or 7 Odin's Eye palettes now. And I have some that I love and adore, and I love the quality. And there are some where I'm like, that's a cool color story, but I think the quality wasn't that good. Odin's Eye is an indie brand that is manufactured in China. Now, good makeup can be made in China. No issues there. They can do some really good makeup. In fact, a lot of makeup factories. I think the most makeup factories in the world are in China. So it makes sense that brands collaborate there. But I do think that it means that once a brand has gone through the testing phase, that they kind of assume that all the palettes are produced at the same level and that they don't really do any batch testing when a new batch comes out. That's my guess. Maybe they can only do so many tests because that's the price point, and that's how they can also keep things affordable. I definitely think that goes into it. I just think that buying something upon release from Oden's Eye has seen me quite lucky in what I get. Then I get the better things. But I feel that if you get things at a later point in time, that the quality can be a little bit lacking. So that's why with Oden's Eye, I definitely pick and choose from the brand what I'm interested in. And I just think that the things they do that are going to be part of their permanent line are just things that they put a little bit more thought and effort into than the things that end up being limited edition. But that's just my experience with the brand. That's just one person. Do with that what you wish. Oden's Eye can do really good eyeshadow. Not gonna lie, but they do get a lot of hype from a lot of creators because they collaborate with so many of them. Another collab with a creator I've already mentioned was by Menagerie, and I don't remember what this thing was called. So Menagerie did a collab with Annette's Makeup Corner, and this is a palette that they had apparently planned out pre-pandemic, and then it couldn't be launched because they ran into a lot of issues. Of course, everything was shut down, so it really affected a lot of makeup brands. So this release was apparently pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And I almost bought this. The only reason why I didn't end up buying it was because it had a random orange. And I just don't love an orange. But some of the other shades in it were just really, really lovely. I think it represented the makeup aesthetic that I think Annette's Makeup Corner was doing at that time a lot more. She seems to be doing a little bit more neutral looks now, which I was surprised by because I don't watch her all the time. I see all of her videos in my subscription feed though, but I do watch her from time to time. And it's a creator who I really enjoy, I really enjoy her opinions, and I do really enjoy watching her. And I was so ready to support her and do all that. And then I was just like, you know what? Menagerie is very expensive. And then it sold out instantly. And then by the time it restocked, because I think they went to 2 or 3 restocks, I had moved on from it. I was like, oh, and then it was gone forever. And I was like, oh, but I don't think I really missed out on it. At the end of the day, I think it was too similar to some of the other things that Menagerie already did in the past and some of the palettes I already owned. So I don't think I'm really missing out on not having that palette. But yeah, I just feel that once I forget about something, if I put it on a wish list and then I just completely forget about purchasing it, it was just not meant to be. And that's definitely what happened with this one. And finally, the Glamlight and Michaela collabs. So Michaela is one of the biggest beauty influencers over on TikTok, and she became huge pretty much overnight, and she got a couple of collab collections with Glamlight. Glamlight as a brand, I only tried one palette by them, the Cake palette, which everybody loved. The year that released, it was in everybody's top 10s, like top 10 palettes of the year, and I was the only person who was like, but I don't like the shimmers. I couldn't build up the shimmers. Some of the more vibrant mattes in the palette looked very patchy when I blended them out because it didn't really go with my fair undertone. So that's why I wasn't in love with Glamlight as much as everybody else was. And then she started doing these collabs, and I joined TikTok last year, and I definitely saw some of her videos. And I was just like, I don't really need these. They are pretty big, even though green, purples, and blues, that's definitely the color story, I think, of both of the releases. I think the second one was even more green, blue, purple heavy, and I was like, oh, it's exactly my kind of color story. But I was like, it's Glamlight. And I didn't love their formula. And I already have blue, green, purple palettes to the point where I didn't feel like I needed this. Especially because it is big. It had a couple of really warm toned neutrals across the top, especially the part 2. So I was like, do I really need this? Is this really where I want to put my money towards. And I was like, I don't care how many people rave about this palette. I don't care how much of the beauty world loves these palettes. I just don't think they are quite right for me, and that's why I decided to pass up on them. And I definitely think that it was sort of like a hype for a minute, because you can now very easily get the palettes. Like, you can easily get your hands on them because I think they made them in droves, and people were flocking to them at first, and all of the collections were selling out within like hotcakes. And now they don't. And I'm like, I'm not entirely sure whether it was worth the hype. I definitely think it was like this whole thing, like she was going to be like the new Jaclyn Hill and whatever. And I definitely think that Michaela is on a learning curve, that's for sure. And in terms of like the brand itself, I definitely think they have moved on from this collaboration as well, which I never think is a very good sign either. So yeah, I never got that one either because I wasn't sure of the quality that the brand has to offer, and also because the influencer that they collabed with, I was like, don't really need this either. So yeah, those are some eyeshadow palettes I didn't buy. I definitely have already done a video about which palettes I hope to be buying soon. So I definitely try to balance things out. I don't want to be overly negative on this channel, but there are just certain things that I know won't work for me, or that are just too similar to things I already have, or there may be other reasons there as well. So let me know in a comment down below, what are some eyeshadow palettes that you passed up on? I would love to know. And then for now, I hope you'd like to stay tuned for more, because we're still in the midst of doing eyeshadow palette month. I have more content coming your way, so I hope you have a great day, take care, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye-bye!